What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I want to break down some big news that just came out involving President Trump's tariffs, what's happening with Costco's earnings that just came out, and the news coming out for tomorrow, which will be affecting the stock market. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 25 in total. And deposit $5,000 and you're guaranteed 60 free stocks. You'll also qualify for an 8.1% APY in uninvested cash, and the offer ends very soon at the end of July. Anyways, as far as the market's going, I just wanted to mention that SPY is in a very, very critical place. As you guys can tell, there's a possible left shoulder, head, and right shoulder forming right over here. And if we end up breaking structure right here, we could be looking for a big dip back down to fill this gap. However, there's also the possibility that this is a trap for retail. And if SPY could get back above around this 595 area, we could try to invalidate this head and shoulders and try to make new highs to break out even higher. So it could go either way depending on the data that's coming out. So that's why you want to watch your key levels. But just know that there is a head and shoulders pattern that's developing, and we'll see if it pans out or not. I'll talk more about the specific nitty-gritty details in just a couple of minutes. I first want to talk about the news coming out and the catalyst that will affect this market. So the first thing I want to mention is that we had Jerome Powell meeting up with President Trump today. This is some big news because President Trump has been urging Jerome Powell to cut rates as soon as possible. However, Jerome Powell said that he does not want to do it that way. He's not just going to cut rates based off political intentions. He wants to stay non-political when it comes to his analysis of monetary policy and the U.S. economy. President Trump called Jerome Powell a fool and mentioned that he is making a big mistake and that he wants to see him cut rates as soon as possible. President Trump mentioned that Jerome Powell is known for being very slow. He's too late, Powell, as he said previously, and that he is not happy with that decision. However, despite that, Jerome Powell doesn't really care, and he said that he's going to do what he deems is necessary. And because of the higher inflationary and unemployment risks, the Fed has to keep rates higher for longer. Now, Jerome Powell's argument is that, and although he may get criticism for this, his argument is that he is saying that because we're getting decent inflationary numbers, because we're getting decent employment numbers, right? We're not seeing unemployment exploding. The US economy can afford higher rates for longer for now because of the political uncertainty about these tariffs. And that's what he's making very, very clear. Now, the criticism of Jerome Powell would be that, he's basically waiting for something bad to happen before he starts to cut rates. It's like as soon as we start to see pain in the economy, as soon as unemployment starts to go up, that's when he's going to start cutting. Many may argue that it makes more sense for him to cut now and then wait and see what happens and then slowly just do it and do it and do it instead of keeping rates for too long before things start breaking. There's different views of looking at things, but this depends on, and I'm going to agree with this claim that it depends on a lot of factors. Do we truly see a big surge in unemployment, a big surge in inflation? We're yet to see that looking at the data, but we'll see just to be safe as forecasters are anticipating that in the next upcoming months. That's very, very important. So we'll see what ends up happening, and we'll see if Jerome Powell is right to do this or not. It's possible he's completely wrong. We'll see. I want to be very, very unbiased when I say this because you never know. On top of this, there's been some big news that came out. As a reminder, the federal courts on Wednesday, they came out and they blocked President Trump's decisions to sweep tariffs across the board. This was some big news that came out, but even with that happening, I just want to say that down here, you guys can see that even with those restrictions, President Trump would still likely have the ability to launch import taxes of 15% for 150 days on nations with which the U.S. runs a substantial trade deficit. This is based off regulations under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. Now, that's what happened as of yesterday, but then we got some new updates that just came out from President Trump. So President Trump is obviously not happy about the decision that now, they're going through the courts. They're arguing about this as litigation getting involved. But he mentioned that he's going to continue to fight for what he believes is like necessary and important for the U.S. prices and trade policy. The federal appeals court, however, they halted the ruling invalidating President Trump's tariffs. And for now, I would say that things are delayed. So there's nothing like that's super certain yet because we're going to see the federal appeals court come out. They're going to once again fight from their end, trying to appeal the decision. But then we have other forms of litigation now coming up where they're going to continue to fight for it. So we're going back and forth right now. We have some courts saying that they want to block these tariffs. President Trump is kind of like exceeding what is in his power. Then you have other appeals courts coming out that are trying to appeal that decision, and they're going to continue to likely just litigate as time goes on. So this is not going to just be done with overnight. This could go on for many, many weeks, many months. But as of right now, the tariffs are now going to be fought in court, and we'll have to see what happens. Despite this, President Trump's team have said, we heard Lutnick and many other important President Trump team members telling us that, hey, it's going to be okay. President Trump is going to use his power to the best of his ability to get what needs to be done and to get those trade policies in place. President Trump also mentioned that all these countries want trade deals. They're going to happen, and he's confident that it's going to be okay. Yes, there's going to be a lot of litigation. There's going to be a lot of fighting in the courts, but President Trump is confident it's going to still happen. He's confident he's going to be making the decisions, and the trade deals are going to come. So that's what we've heard from him, at least so far. We'll see if he says anything else. I'll keep you guys updated in case that happens. But for now, we're seeing a lot of appeals going on, a lot of battles in the courts involving his tariffs. Now, there's been some news that came out from China. One of the speakers for the Commerce Ministry said that China has always maintained that there's no winners in a trade war, and they are incentivizing the U.S. to once again back down on the tariffs. They think that the U.S. is basically doing the wrong thing by unilaterally imposing tariffs the way they are, and they want to see us abolish them. That's what they're arguing, at least so far. Now, President Trump's argument is that, wait a minute, there's these high trade deficits, and they are getting in the way of this equality that we're looking for, and that's part of the reason why he wants to impose these higher tariffs. So we'll see what happens with negotiations. There is still time left. We're currently at the halfway point since the 90-day pause took place, but I do think that the courts make things a little bit more complicated. It could delay things even more once again. That could be part of why the market bounced a bit alongside Nvidia's earnings. But once again, the appeals court have come out and they are once again trying to get in the way of that decision. So things are still very complicated in the courts, and we just have to wait and see what happens as time goes on. The next big catalyst for the stock market is going to be tomorrow being Friday, May 30th, 2025. Okay. At 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the core PCE data and the PCE data for all items coming out. For those who don't know, PCE is very similar to CPI. And when you look at the CPI chart, you'll see that all items CPI came down for the month of April, which is indicative of the fact that PCE will likely resemble this. All items PCE is likely going to be good tomorrow. However, core CPI was flat for the month of April, which tells us it's very sticky. There's a good chance that core PCE, the data that comes out tomorrow, is also going to be kind of sticky. This is actually expected to go up just a little bit by 0.1 to 0.2%. So we're expecting a slight increase in core, but all items PCE is expected to be about the same. So please keep that in mind. So we'll see what ends up happening as time goes on. Will we get numbers that are the same? I do think that all items should be decent, but core is a little bit concerning. It's going to either be the same, if not a little bit higher, most likely, looking at the current projections. So please be very careful with this data. Then we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's going to cause some volatility 30 minutes after the stock market opens, so get ready for that. And we'll see what all of this leads to. Last but not least, we have Costco announcing earnings. They just gave us some updates. Then we have nothing else too significant for tomorrow. What's good about Costco is the fact that I think we have the numbers right over here. What's good is, I'm sorry, actually, I think I have the numbers up here. Sorry about that, guys. The numbers are pretty good for them. They beat on EPS at $4.28 a share, and their revenues at $63.21 billion, beating expectations, which is good news for them. Net income is also going up, but the problem we have is that despite the fact that we are seeing their e-commerce sales rising and such, there are still some worries about the tariffs, which could raise consumer prices and hurt their overall margins. But they're very, very unpredictable right now, according to what they're telling us. And what's very good about Costco, however, is that they have lots of memberships, and that could help offset, what's going on with tariffs, because they could even take in some hits to their margins. They're willing to do that just for the fact that they could get their business to expand. That's something that Costco's done historically, and it's been helping them in a lot of different ways. So as far as the tariffs go, There's nothing confirmed about Costco. We know that about a third of their products are sold from imports. They come from imports, other countries. That's a third of their U.S. sales, to be more precise. So during the uncertain times, they're going to be very, very careful with how they price things. They made that very clear, but there's no confirmation that they have to increase prices a whole lot yet. So that is still a decent piece of news. We'll see how things end up going, but once again, we're just going to be very, very patient for now, just to see if we end up getting anything else like that. So keep that in mind. There's still lots of uncertainty so far. The fear and greed index is currently at greed, excuse me. Greed is making up the majority of sentiment. We'll see if that shifts. Momentum is at fear right now. We're going to see if this gets a rejection or not, depending on the price action. The put to call option ratio is starting to dip a little bit, still kind of neutral. We'll see if this bounces or not as well. And the VIX is very flat. It's not really doing a whole lot. So, what is my prediction for the markets? Let's talk about the charts from this point on. Looking at SPY, we're pretty much just range bound. That's what we did for the majority of the day. We rejected. We pumped with Nvidia's earnings and the news about President Trump's tariffs being basically banned, at least temporarily, from the courts, only for them to be appealed again, which once again undoes that, which is why we saw this like pump and dump. But we're range bound, right? As we hit 590, SPY has been rejecting. As we hit 588, SPY is trying to balance, and we're stuck in the middle for now. Now, for those out there who are bears, if you're a big bear in the markets, if you think the market's going to dump, you want to see SPY lose 588. If we lose this, there's going to be a risk of us returning down towards this support over here around 584. Then eventually this gap for 578. We could be filling the gap in the next couple of days if this head and shoulders plays out, right? If you get a big rejection, if you lose 588 and then 585, expect that big dump to fill the gap. Now, if this is a trap, okay, the bulls would argue that, wait a minute, it's just a trap, because when you zoom out, we're still technically making higher highs and higher lows. That's the argument that the bulls can make. And as long as we hold 588 even tomorrow, if we get a decent PCE, then the argument is going to be that we could be looking for a nice rebound move back up to at least 592 to 595, so long as we're above 590. So if we're above 590, we're looking a bit more bullish. And if we end up losing 588, we're more bearish. What is my prediction? Well, what I think is going to happen is that off PCE, there might be a small push tomorrow morning for like 590 to 592, but I still think we're going to be trading in a sideways manner, especially with all the options expiring. But if we can't hold above 592, and this is my risk for everyone, right? We have a left shoulder, we have a head, and then we have a right shoulder forming. And if we don't hold above 592, there's going to be a risk of us turning back down towards these lows. And then if we lose the lows, that's going to be our confirmation of the head and shoulders. I do see a risk of this looking at the current setup, because when we pushed off Nvidia's earnings, we got a big rejection. And I do see this setup that's coming throughout the markets. So of course, wait for confirmation. Might see a small push tomorrow, but I think for the most part, we're just going to be range bound between 588 and 592. But in case we get some bad news, in case something else happens involving the tariffs, there's going to be that risk of us coming down for this head and shoulders. This could get filled. This gap over here could get filled in the next like 1 to 2 trading days. So please keep that in mind. For the QQQ, very similar setup. We got a big rejection ever since we got Nvidia's earnings, and also after the news came out about President Trump's appeal to the court's decisions. So that is also part of why the market's kind of trading this way. So from what I'm seeing, I do think we could try to bounce. Now, if you're bullish, you want to see us hold above 523 and 525 to push more. If we're bearish, you want to see us lose this 515 area. If that fails us, we could be dipping all the way down to fill the gap towards 510 or below. So what I think is going to happen is kind of like a mix of both. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some volatility tomorrow morning off PCE. Maybe we get a decent PCE and we bounce a bit, but I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot of sideways price action between 523 and 517, just like what we saw today. And either by the end of the day, if not by next week, we might see a dip if we can't get back above these highs, or at least back above 523 to be frank. If we can't break 523, right? If you break this, we could be pushing higher. If we can't do that, there's going to be that risk of us pulling back to like 515, and we have to hold that, or else the gap could get filled back down to like 508. So there's going to be that risk of a head and shoulders looking at the current setup. That is the most likely possibility looking at the setup, but there's no 100% guarantees until we get confirmation. Please keep that in mind. Now, the IWM has an identical setup, right? You guys can quite clearly see there's a left shoulder, head, and right shoulder, right? Now, if you're a bear, you need to see this lose 204 tomorrow. If we lose 204, I think we easily dip to fill the gap at 202 or below to complete this head and shoulders. If we're bullish, however, you want to see us hold above 208. If we hold 208 after we get PCE, then we could be looking for a bullish continuation. This could just be like a higher high, higher low setup. So it could go either way depending on our data. Looking at the head and shoulders, I do want to give you guys a warning about this. I do think we push tomorrow, but we have to see if we hold 208. If we don't, there could be that rejection off the head and shoulders. So make sure you're prepared for anything, depending on PCE. But there might be a small push tomorrow morning, and we'll see if we get a rejection, right? Looking at ES right now, we're looking kind of weak to me because we got a massive rejection off 6,000 and we formed a bearish divergence on the 4-hour time frame. Now, could this be a cup and handle that's about to form, or are we about to see like a small pullback? It's possible. It depends on PCE and what happens with President Trump and his tariffs. Tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised if, now, by the way, if we get back above like 59.50, we could try to push back up to the highs here. But if we don't, we're looking for like 59.50 or so to see some consolidation like this. And then if we lose 58.80, if we lose the low here, we could be looking for a dip lower all the way down towards 58.50 off a left shoulder head and then right shoulder. So there's going to be a risk of this looking at ES unless we get back above like 59.50 to break higher. The head and shoulders risk is going to be right over there. So please keep that in mind. So we'll see how this ends up moving. If we lose 5,900, we're looking for a dip back down. So please keep that in mind and we'll just have to see how it goes. But I do want to give you guys a risk warning about that. Tomorrow morning off PCE, we could be pushing to form a right shoulder. We need to break and hold 59.50 to be bullish. If we can't hold that, if we get a rejection, if we trade sideways like this, be warned of a head and shoulders. It might lead to some downside, hurting some of these bulls. There's a possibility looking at the setup, but we have to be very, very unbiased and watch the levels just to be safe. Looking at NQ, we look kind of weak, guys. We look kind of weak because I could see a retest of 21,500 right over here, but we need to break and hold above our 50 EMA, 21,538 to remain bullish. If we can't break that, the same setup remains, right? Left shoulder, head, right shoulder. That could take us all the way down to the lower 21,000s for a very healthy move down. That's always a possibility. Bitcoin is looking a little bit weaker because we're losing structure. We made a high here, came down, lower high. This also sort of resembles like a distribution pattern. So you want to get back above 106,680. You want to break past this, start pushing higher. If we don't break this, we could be looking for a move lower, and that could actually drag us lower back down to about 105,000 or below. So please be very careful, guys. There's a risk of downside looking at Bitcoin. That's going to be very key, at least for now. As far as Tesla goes, we're looking kind of weak here. We have a double top. We were trying to form a flag. I was hoping we would try to break and hold 368 to remain bullish, but we failed to do that. So Tesla's technically just range bound, meaning when we hit 355, we like to bounce. When we hit 368, we like to reject. And that's what it's been doing for the last couple of days. Now, as of recent, we're barely holding 355 right now. So it looks kind of weak to me. And I think we might be dipping towards like the lower 350s. And we'll see if we bounce off that. If we don't, we could be looking for a much bigger rejection and a move down lower towards, below 350, which could take us down towards this gap support at 346. If that fails us, we also have this gap to fill around 340, so please be very careful as time goes on. Nice double top rejection on Tesla. The odds do favor downside a bit when you have setups like these. Tesla needs to reclaim at least 363 to really rebound, to see a nice break towards the highs again. If we can't hold above 360, we're going to be at risk of retesting the lower 350s looking at the current setup. So I hope that's as clear as possible. There's weakness on Tesla stock, unfortunately. Nvidia was trying to bounce after earnings. It did a nice job at pushing, but now it's starting to slow down a bit. I need to see Nvidia get back above 140 to bounce. If we can't hold 140, we're going to be at risk of dipping to like 135 or below, so keep that in mind. For Aapl, got a big rejection as well. We need to get back above 201.8. If we break that, we're looking for a push back up. If we can't break that, we're going to be at risk of dipping back down towards 197.5. If we don't hold 197.5 to 198 on Aapl, we could be dipping to fill this gap all the way down towards 196. So please be very, very careful. Big rejection here. If we make a lower high, we could be dipping to 196. On Netflix, we're rejecting as well. Now, as we're getting this rejection, you want to see how it ends up reacting towards 1187. If we hit this resistance, we'll see if we come back down towards this support right here. Looks a little bit weak to me. I think we might be retesting the low. I do see a small bounce coming to about 1187 or so, but then we could reject and start dipping lower. So please be very, very careful. On MSTR, we look a little bit more bullish with an inverse head and shoulder setup. However, right now we're just trading sideways. So although we do have like a left shoulder here ahead, then a potential right shoulder, for the short term, we're not going to just like break out instantly unless we get a good catalyst. It looks like it's just going to do this, go back and forth between supply and demand between 376 and 365 before it tries to potentially break out like this. This is what it could be doing. We're seeing some sideways price action for now, but we'll see if we get a bounce. Celsius has a range right now between 36.4 is resistance and 35.8 is support. I think we trade sideways for now, not really doing a whole lot as volume is slowing down. And then we'll see if we break to the upside or downside. Hopefully we break to the upside if we break 36.4. Supermicro is not looking too good. It got a rejection, not really holding up as well as it should. There's a gap to fill down here all the way down to 40 flat. So I want to see if we get back above 41.5. Otherwise, we could be dipping to fill the gap towards 40. So please be very careful. Palantir looks kind of weak. It's trading sideways. We like to bounce near 120. We also like to reject off 127. As of right now, we're rejecting. We could be looking for a move down to 120. Rivian is making lower highs. We need to see if we hold support. We could be retesting 15.14 to 15.3, and we'll see if we reject here. Could see a push and a rejection, so give this some time. SoFi is rejecting, making lower highs here. We have to see if we could reclaim at 13.2. If not, we could be dipping back down towards 13 flat. So please be very careful as we have this bearish divergence. On AMD, we have a bearish divergence here. We're going to see if we can reclaim 114. If not, we could be dipping back down to fill this gap towards 110. So please be very careful, especially as we have this divergence. That could also drag us lower towards the 110 area. For ARM, we're also rejecting right over here. We're going to see if we can reclaim support. I'm looking for a test of 130 to see if we reject or not. I think it might be pushing for 130, so be careful and see if we get that rejection. PayPal is making lower highs, not looking too good. It might retest 71 to 71.3, and we'll see if it rejects. I'm also eyeing this gap down here around 69, so if we hit resistance, we could turn back down to 69. Coinbase looks kind of weak, lower highs, lower lows. I want to zoom out a little bit on this setup. It's a little bit weak here. We need to reclaim at least 251. If we can't, there's a risk of us coming down towards like 243. So I'm seeing some weakness on coin. Amazon needs to hold above 205. If we don't, we're going to easily retest 202.78. Meta has to hold 640 tomorrow, might bounce a bit before it starts to dip. If 640 does not hold, we're looking for 632 to be retested. Looks a little bit weak to me. Google looks kind of heavy. Double top leg structure. We need to get back above 174. If not, we could be dipping towards like 169. Microsoft has a bearish divergence rejection. We need to hold above 456. If we can't, we could be looking down towards like 450. So please keep that in mind. The VIX is looking a little bit more bullish. It depends if we could break past 20 or not. There is a gap to fill up here. So are we about to see like a triple or like a double bottom on the VIX before it bounces a little bit? We're going to have to see about that if that's about to cause some downside. The 10-year has a head and shoulders, and the dollar is kind of dipping here. It still looks kind of weak. So as far as the market goes, I do think we could bounce a little bit tomorrow morning thanks to PCE. But there's some weakness on a lot of these charts, especially after this big rejection on SPY. So I'll be watching to see if we push towards like 592, if we break that to push more, or if we kind of hit this and then start to shuffle a bit and then reject and form like a head and shoulders with a left shoulder, a head and then a right shoulder to take us back down towards 584, if not this gap for like the lower levels. So we'll see what happens. Thank you all so much for listening. Please enjoy the rest of your day. I'll be back with another upload very, very soon. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, please take care and enjoy the rest of your guys' evenings. Thank you for listening and peace out.